It's funny. I didn't even realize until you sent me your photos that you were prior enlisted, that you were an enlisted guy. Like, I was like, wait, I'm sure we talked about it at some point, but it's been so long since we like hung out or anything.
Yeah. I mean, no, I don't think I even talked about too much when I was in, like a lot of people just didn't know. Um,
Would
but
you
I
like?
just,
Let's talk about that. Why did you join the Marines, and did you come in as a reservist, or what was your enlisted time like?
yeah. Yeah, no. Well, I could tell you the full story. Are we already going? Are we
Yeah,
already
man,
going?
we're
Oh,
recording now.
we're live already. Jeez, see?
Well,
This is
nothing live, but if you want me to cut some of that front end out, I
No,
can.
you don't have to cut anything. That's funny. Look, you're getting the natural conversations out. The it's actually a really funny story. I come from a huge family, right? Of just a lot of I have one brother,
Mm-hmm.
but really seven brothers and sisters total.
Oh wow.
Cousins that my parents lived with us. Like it was just a joint communal family, right? So I always say, and it's true. Like four brothers, four sisters, right, is kind of the core group there, and a majority of everyone became, you know, a doctor or something big like that.
That's a stereotype.
Oh, it's a total stereotype, right? Because you're East Asian or Indian, and my grandfather was a cotton picker in Africa under rule of Idi Amin. Isn't
Oh
that
wow.
funny? So like was a refugee after that, the family, and refuged out of Uganda, got picked up by England. And my dad always jokes, about cricket, like sport of his motherland, and my dad's Indian, right, descent, and it's like cricket, sport of my motherland, and he's talking about England, so he's always associated himself with the country that took all of those folks in and gave them homes and refuge and all of that. And then anyway, so they migrated here, and then so the way forward was education and school. That was it. So like nobody knew what the military was. I didn't really know what the military was growing up. Growing up in Chicago, Buena Park in Los Angeles, right? Like little apartment out there,
Yeah.
nothing big. And mom and dad was a copy repairman, and my mom was a biologist, a biochemist. So like Exxon Valdez spill, she was involved in like inspecting those types of things, and so we did that. And then I went to college, or I went to high school and all of that. And coming out of high school, I went to high school in San Diego, then in Texas, and then got to play a little water polo in Colorado Springs, and then was going to come back to school here in California for college. And these recruiters were calling my parents' house in Poway, and Poway, like down here in Southern California, like big, just city in the country, right? Miramar's
Mm-hmm.
right here, Pendleton's up the road, Marine Corps shop is right there, like the recruiting station, and they were essentially calling my dad or my parents' house and essentially saying, um, "Hey, do you want to join the Marine Corps? Do you want to join? Do you want to join the military?" And my parents were taking these calls every day. So I come home for like spring break or something. I forgot what it was exactly, but the my dad was like, "Hey, can you call the recruiters back?" And he didn't know what they were. He's like, "The army guys have been calling every day. They want to talk to you, and you must have your name. You must have signed up somewhere. You must have put your name out." And sure enough, right, they were just calling the yellow pages. Realized that I was there, turning 18 this next year, and calling to do the recruiting. And I thought, and remember, this was 90s, right? So this was when we traded yellow pages and white pages in for ice cream cones at Thrifty Ice Cream. So like that's how you got people's information and their data and their phone numbers and their addresses. It was all out there. So they they said, "Hey, go down to the recruiting office and get your name off the list if you don't want them to call you." So I rode my bike down to the recruiter's office that day. No, I didn't know. I mean, hell, I didn't know Miramar was down the road. You know, so
You didn't know that?
no, I didn't know. I mean, I lived in San Diego, but I went to school and I went to school, in Texas, came back, but I mean,
Mm.
I was pretty sheltered. in
Plus, as
terms
I
of
guess
like,
as a kid, you're probably not really thinking about that. I love
I
driving
don't know.
by there because you see the jets flying over.
Yeah, and you got to think like 90s, right? Like like the Navy Marine Corps Air Station transitioning happening. Like I had no clue
Mm.
that the Navy was down there the whole time. It doesn't matter. So I went down there to get my name off the list because that's how I thought it worked. You go down to the recruiting office, get your name off the calling list, and then come and be like, "Hey, I'm not interested." So I go down there, and uh, these recruiters were so good that they convinced me while I was down there to enlist in the Marine Corps. And instead of riding my bike back home at the age of 17, I walked my bike back home because I was so scared to tell my parents what I did because I still needed their consent. I wasn't 18 yet.
Yeah.
But I came back and I essentially said, "Hey, I'm only 17, so I don't have to. We don't have to do this." And my dad looked at me and he said, when you make a commitment to something, you do it." And he made me enlist, which was
Wow.
crazy. So like it was enlistment by mistake, if that makes sense. I mean, some of the best mistakes I've ever made in my life, right? It's one of the best mistakes I've ever made in my life, but enlistment by absolute mistake. And during Clinton, no wars, right? Nothing big happening, and they'd convinced I wanted to go to law school, and they'd convinced me that becoming a military policeman equated to would help me go to law school. You know,
It's law. It's like the same thing.
yeah, military police law school, right? It'll help you. You can just transfer it over. And so I became a 5811 MP, enlisted going into the Marine Corps at age 17. It was
That's wild. Was this active
uh,
duty or reserves?
no, so I enlisted in the reserves. I had a weird career. I enlisted in the reserves, stayed in the reserves pretty active, but like, I mean, I had enough active points in those first 2 years to even call it like a full sat active year, like
Oh,
every
really?
year until like right prior to September 11th when everything was ramping up. And then I actually went active duty right at September 11th, just call it right then. Um, and though I came off of the reserves and back on active duty when I commissioned, uh, I actually never left active duty
Hmm.
after that. So there was all these loopholes, not loopholes, but there's all these holes in the way you could serve and do time and do your active reserve and all these things pre-war and then post-war and then how the GI Bill changed post 9/11. So
Mm-hmm.
um, and then even schools and universities. I mean, it's. I mean, I say it all the time. It's no secret. Like if I were to go to school now, I probably wouldn't graduate because once I was in the reserves and especially after 9/11 happened, I I think I audited or augmented majority of my classes. I mean, I wrote letters from the duty stations I was at. I took tests over mail. I handwrote essays and just sent him like so. I was going to school full time as if I was not active duty
Mm-hmm.
while I was active duty um, in the reserves, still utilizing the VA money
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like the GI money, and then even putting money in for like this kicker and all these things that I thought was going to pay off, and then at a certain point, the 9/11 thing came in, and it was like, well, you don't need any of this.
I did that
So
too.
yeah, and then I had all this other benefit that I still haven't used, but um, the big thing about it is I found ways to play water polo in college, go to school full time, and be active duty at the same time. Then literally get off of active duty into the reserves for about less than 30 days to facilitate my commission back onto active duty on the commission side.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I would say it's kind of like your career in the Marine Corps. Like I had to be really scrappy to get what I wanted, and I just found little loopholes to get things done. I mean, you and I served together. I mean, I think that's how I try to conduct business most of the time. Just find little
Yeah.
loopholes and be scrappy, and when we didn't have air support, go find it
Yeah.
somewhere,
I
right?
say it all the time. I'm like, hey, a lot of successful people in the military and people that are doing the jobs and things that you want to do are the only difference between them and you is that they took initiative and found a way. Like there's a
I
school
love
I
that.
want to go to. Oh, well, I'm going to find out what are the requirements. Well, I'm going to bring everything to Gunny and show him, like, I meet all the requirements. Hey, and look, the unit doesn't even have to fund it. You know, you got to give them all the justification of why you should be the one that gets to go do this. Because a lot of times, a lot of people are just treading water, man. They're just doing their time. They're totally okay with just coming into work, doing their job, and going back home. But there's a lot of people that want to do these extra schools either for qualifications later on in their civilian career or just for, you know, something interesting. I was a mechanic. I hated being a mechanic my first 3 years. So I was like, send me to chaser school. You know, I'll go to the brig and pick those dudes up and whatever. Like, it's like, but that kind of stuff, you have to kind of put yourself out there to make it happen. You know, it's a huge part of it.
People say like you did all these different things, and I said, well, it wasn't that I was special. I just found ways to attach myself. You know, when I was enlisted, found ways to, like, I was a military policeman standing gate guard at Yuma, Arizona. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that unless you're at 29 Palms, right? I mean, it was just
That's rough.
And this was like the only thing that was in Yuma was the Cold Stone and the Outback. And
that's tough.
And I tell people, that's what I was doing, but I found ways to attach myself to Fast Company. And I found ways to attach myself to First Recon. And I found ways to attach myself to a lifestyle that I loved, to be able to play water polo and go to school full time at the same, you know. And then when I saw these F-18s on the line, I didn't think I was going to fly when I commissioned. To be frank, I was like, I wanted, you know, when you commission in the Marine Corps, you have to compete for your MOS.
Yeah.
I was not an aviation contract, and I was like, my backbone was so weak, kind of like when I walked into the recruiting office at 17, when they said, "Hey, here's a guaranteed and here's a non-guaranteed." I said, "Hey, I was prior military policeman. Make me a military policeman officer," because that was a requirement. Mm-hmm. And I said, "I'll take the guaranteed, and then I'll go to the bureau or I'll go do something like that." And then they said, "Well, actually, you know, there was a whole another set of things that happened," but I ended up getting an aviation spot in flight school to go fly. And I remember when that happened, I was down. I went back home, and you know, it was at my parents' house, and kind of visited my old unit down at Miramar, and I was rolling down. You know at Miramar when you pull into the front, the north gate, and you just go straight, and you pass the McDonald's on the right-hand side. There's the big crossroads, and then you keep going straight. And once you pass the fire station, it's like a 4-lane road with a little thing in the middle. And once you pass the fire station, the hill kind of goes down, and then it kind of comes up. But you look in front of you, and there's this chain link fence, and you see Hangar 1 on your left-hand side, and then you see just this line of F-18 tails. At the time, I think it's helicopter tails now. It's changed, but you know, for the most part, it's always been F-18 tails, and it was VMFA VMFAW 121, which was the Green Knights, and then right behind that was the Vikings 225. I mean, I didn't know the squadrons at the time. I just saw a bunch of F-18s, and I was looking at the Marines kind of going in, riding the cars. I was like, I could be one of the Marines fixing the planes, which I guess could be cool, or I could be in the cockpit. How do I get in the cockpit? And that's when I really committed my emotion and my mental state to, that's what I'm going to hopefully do. Now, there was about 100 different points where I tried to jump off that same track and leave it because it got too hard or I was failing so much. And but you know, sure enough, I ended up in the cockpit, and I, you know, it's really cool. Like once you put your mind to something, you could totally do it. You just have to envision it, and that's even in the private sector too. I mean, here, like I'm at Microsoft now, and I can honestly tell you, I don't have the pedigree or the credentials to have been, you know, very blessed and able to do what I do today. If I was just a Joe Schmo walking up the street. But someone invested in me, and you know, I went out and got really scrappy on how I was able to show them that investment was going to pay off, or how I can make things work, or how I visualized our business. And and it's just like you said, you know, that's how we grow Fortune 100 companies now, right?
Yeah.
We write white papers, we find new ways to make money, we find new ways to impact people, to do more good. Um, you know, you're not climbing a ladder, you're building it as you climb. You're finding resources around you to kind of put that next thing together to hold on to and grip up on. So yeah, I mean the Marine Corps taught me a lot. But I don't think it was more the Marine Corps. It was probably that journey of going through the Marine Corps and doing all those little things that I look at now and I can think of, well, crap, like I was that scrappy then, you know, why not be that scrappy now? And I love how we were kind of talking about this because I was talking to somebody at our company the other day and they're like, Vishal, look at all these little things that you're doing. Like it's almost like you're being very scrappy on the way you do things. I said, I'm not really being scrappy. I'm just doing what I've always done. Just taking advantage of resources that I have in front of me and then really really utilizing them to do what I want
Yeah.
and to invest in the impact I want to make, which is for right now in my current role, drive um, a new persona, a new vision of how we look at cybersecurity from, you know, an enterprise 100 company perspective, how we're going to change the way we look at data and privacy and how we get people to think about the importance of this stuff differently than what we have in the past. And I was like, I'm not trying to be scrappy. I'm just that's how I've always worked. You know, you just got to be honest and transparent.
The Marine Corps is a good like incubator for that kind of thought process because there's a lot of opportunities out there and it really takes someone, a free thinker, to go, okay, well, how do I get from point A to point B? And not only are there opportunities, but a lot of times there's guidebooks. You know, there's Marine Corps orders, there's bulletins and stuff that get released and stuff like that. And it's like if you use the resources around you and go, oh, hey, you know, First Marine Division or whatever is a lot of this many seats, you know, and we have whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like seeking out that information isn't that hard. Probably easier to do it in the Marine Corps than in the corporate world where it's less structured and a lot of it's probably innovative, right? You know, like you said, you're building the ladder along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is easier to do in the Marine Corps. And I would also say it's partly because you have some givens that you don't even think about in the Marine Corps. None of us joined the Marine Corps to make a crud ton of money, but we joined for purpose. We joined for camaraderie. We joined because we have to bring ourselves out of a social economic situation. It's a very diverse population of people,
For sure.
and so it's not so much, I think, easier because of its unstructuredness, or the Marine Corps is very structured in a way, but I think you don't have to worry about the givens like your food,
That's true.
your pay, leader. You know, I used to think I was a leader in the Marine Corps, and I got out to the corporate world. I'm like, I'm not leading. I'm managing people. I'm telling people what to do, and it's not working. And I realized real quick for me, and this is Vishal's take, was I wasn't leading in the Marine Corps. Everyone talks about how we're great military leaders and how how military folks are really good in leadership positions and they're visionaries. I challenge that fact a little bit where it's so structured in the military. I'm telling someone what to do because guess what? They have to do it because of the rank, because they're contractually obligated to do it. And even if they screw it up, Justin, they're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm managing them. I'm not leading them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so like there is a lot of structure there, but what that forces that individual to do is be creative in the way they are successful because they realize that they have these givens that they can't change and that they have available to them. And they can go to sleep that night and come back the next day and you're going to be held to that same standard, that same accountability that, you know, and, you know, I didn't realize this till I left, but no matter how bad I did and how bad of a Marine I was, we kind of spoke about it. None of that mattered. None of that mattered if you went to the weapons school and you know, flew at Top Gun or weapons and tactics school, you know, where we all went as well. Right. And the Marine Corps' version of Top Gun and became an instructor and all these cool things that like I'm able to go grab a beer and talk about. Guess what? None of that crap matters on the outside.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So on the inside, like you realize, like all these, we put all these givens in place, but you can succeed. You just have to change that mindset and be scrappy. So I think you're right. Like, but the mentalities are totally different. Um, and you are boxed in a little bit on the corporate side because I think there's a lot more risk involved, right? You can get fired, you can or get laid off or realigned. You have the option to go find thousands of other opportunities. You're not contractually obligated to do what you're doing. You can go look at what you did, Justin. You can learn a whole new skill set and go build a career and build a passion off of that. But in the Marine Corps, if you want to do that, you got to be a lot more scrappy to do that, right? Because
yeah.
you're maybe contracted to do something, and but so I don't know. I took this into a rabbit hole.
No, I mean that's 100%
Uh,
right. I mean, when I was a mechanic, it took me. I didn't want to be a mechanic, and I wanted to do something else, But I had to finish out my contract, 3 years, and then at that reenlistment time, it was like, okay, get out or find another job because I definitely don't want to keep doing this. And yeah, and I just did some research and took some advice from friends and found another job, and it was an awesome opportunity, and it really opened some doors for just fun and games, adventures and whatnot. Um, let's talk about you went through OCS and TBS and everything. Let's talk about the Wizzo flight school kind of path. I had Brett Crosher on last episode, who was a F-18 driver, and there was also I've had I don't know if I've had any other F-18 guys on. I know I've had a Harrier guy. I had Emilio come on, and I've had some skid guys and stuff come on. Let's talk about your path through flight school, what it was like for you, and then how that kind of proceeded through the rest of your career.
yeah, I mean, I'll start with nobody goes to flight school to be a Harrier pilot. You know, unless you're like Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lights or something like that. Like you don't fly Harriers, and you don't go to flight school to go fly C-130s. But
That gave
I'm
me
sure
a huge misrepresentation of Harriers as a child. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Oh,
yeah,
wait, you can't actually do that.
yeah, you can't hang off. You can't hang off the wing.
What?
Yeah. So, I'm sure people go fly. You have to have really high scores to go fly Harriers. And anyway, I live in the dream. Like the Hornet pipeline was insane. We all have these egos. I'll say all the F-18 guys have these egos. We're all very forward thinking. I mean, you were in the JTAC community. I was an air officer and I was a JTAC instructor, and a lot of the air officers were Hornet guys or fixed wing guys, because we had this mission that was always tied to the ground and the Marines on the ground to support dropping, munition and shooting 20 Mike from the cannon in the jet down, and we're always attached to those Marines. But going through the pipeline was largely, you're reminded of that every day as a Wizzo. You go through the normal aviation pipeline. You go learn. I think they changed the curriculum a little bit, but I went and learned how to fly. Got to get accredited in my Cessna 172 and go do like a solo and do all these things, and then you go to flight school. But when I went to flight school, you started learning all the navigation and all the, you call it not the weapons systems stuff, but the naval flight officer pieces, right? Just the co-pilot things. Normal aviation etiquette. I sucked at it. I mean, I failed almost every test I took in flight school. They probably tried to kick me out, but they probably needed people so bad that they kept me in. And then I went through that pipeline. You go through basic, and then you go through an intermediate school, and then you start divvying people up, right? Hey, you're going to go to fighter. You're going to go to, I mean, we had Air Force guys. You're going to go to C-130. You're going to go to, so those types of things. You're going to go to B-1s, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then some of us, there weren't enough Hornet pilots and Hornet air crew and Wizzos in the pipeline, right? We're coming up on going operational, doing a lot in the Middle East, in the Pacific, and they needed these people there. So it's almost like they lowered the bar when I was there, but they knew I was coming, so they figured, they would just lower that bar for me. and got through intermediate, and they said, "Hey, you're in strike, or no, you're in fixed wing. Like, we're gonna go strike and strike fighter. So if you're gonna go to strike, you're gonna go to Prowler, you're gonna go to strike fighter, you're gonna go to Hornet. And if you go strike fighter, it's another 6 weeks here at Pensacola. And by that time, I'd already been through 2 review boards.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
It was so bad. And I selected Hornet at first because of I envisioned going back to that story I told you. I envisioned going back to Miramar and why I did it. And I'll just revert back to doing something else if I got out. And I was like, all right. And then it was the day of the winging, and I'd failed an exam or something, but I'd passed eventually. And one of the instructors was there, and I was just scared to death of him. I thought, this guy just has it in for me. And I won't even be able to fly if I get bumped down now. So I went back into the office. I took my selection out of Hornet, and I changed it to EA6B Prowler, and I put a Prowler note back in there. And then there was a ceremony where the strike guys wing, or when you wing, and the strike guys were winging, and then you go to that ceremony, and they announce for the next class which ones are going to continue to strike and which ones are going to continue to strike fighter. So which ones are only going to be here for another couple weeks and just go, and which ones are going to be here for like another couple months, right? And I go at the winging ceremony, and I'm just praying. I'm like, oh, please, EA6B, 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 North Carolina, Cherry Point. These are great places. I can figure it out. I could figure it out there, They draw my name out of the hat, and they say, Vishal, F-18s, Miramar. And for anyone else in the world, right, that is like the dream pick. Right?
Yeah.
Just F-18s, and then out of all the duty stations, right, I get Miramar. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm going to fail. I am totally going to die. And everyone's like, congratulations, this is amazing, this and that. And I had to like go lock myself in my car for a couple minutes and just scream it out real quick, and then go, okay, I'm in. And then I went out and grabbed some beers. I'm like, I did it. I made F-18s, made Mirror, just ramp myself back up. And then sure enough, like, I almost failed out of the strike fighter platform. Right? I failed like one of my like midterm flights there, and I made it out, and eventually I winged, and I got to Miramar, and which you have to do a whole nother syllabus out there to learn how to fly the F-18, which was just this is like the same story. I was the only Marine to ever go through 3 review boards at Miramar and not get kicked out of the program. I mean, my binder, Justin, looked like a box of Lucky Charms.
What were you finding to be so difficult about it?
I think I obviously had the capability to do everything that I was asked to do. I think I was so nervous, and I let that take everything, right? I was not confident in how I learned, how I retained information, how I do. I was more worried about failing than I was about learning and understanding what I needed to do to why I was doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
I mean, why, and that held me back. There was 1 or 2 instructors that just did not like me either, right? So there's that. But did
you happen to almost get them killed while flying or anything like that? Maybe is that why they got a grudge?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they told me that every time they were in the cockpit with me.
That's got to be sketchy as an instructor pilot, right? When you're out here flying with dudes, you're just like, man, don't kill me today, like, please.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I made it through. The funny thing is, I didn't struggle after I got out of 101, VMFAT, the training squadron at Miramar. My old CO here his name's Dan Goodwin. He's just an amazing human being. And they pulled him in an office, and they had all the West Coast guys there, and they say, "All right, these guys have graduated. You got to, Dan, you got to take Vishal." And he's like, "Why do I have to take him? Because nobody else will." And and we're decommissioning 121 in a year and a half. So he's coming to 225. And he's like, "I don't understand why I have to take him." And he's like, "Well, you're taking him. It's not a choice." So he pulled me in his office the first day, and I jumped. And the first day I got to squadron, they had me do a cross country on a Friday. And I jumped in with the XO. And by the time I was punching in everything in the systems and calling, like, I forgot to call for taxi. And next thing you know, I look up and we're sitting on the runway, facing down the runway, getting ready to take off. And he's like, "Call for takeoff." I forgot to do everything. It was like 15 minutes. It was almost like I was so nervous, right? But the cool thing was, like, we took off, we did all this stuff, we came back. He didn't say a word. And then my CO pulled me in, and he's Pugs pulled me in. And he said, "Hey, up to this moment, like, you have all this, like, it's all behind you now. You've got a clean slate." And from there, I got to go to all the top schools. I got to, I became an instructor. I became a FAC A, right? And then, was an instructor in that community, which was awesome for when I became a JTAC and an air officer, and got to be an instructor there. So you find your niche and you start realizing this is fun, this is awesome, and then you start rolling. So that's kind of what happened. That's kind of what happened there of getting. I forgot what your initial question was now, but
I found. Well, I was asking what was difficult, but I found even as a JTAC evaluator, I feel like every time you get on the radio, you should be a little bit nervous, right? Just because the seriousness of what you're doing, it makes you. To me, I was always like, there was always a little bit of nervousness every time for whatever reason, and at first, I think it kind of bothered me. It's almost that what do you call it, imposter syndrome? Like, how the hell am I the guy in charge of this right now? Like, Jesus, don't mess this up, And then eventually, it got to a point where it's like, oh, I'm the most experienced dude here. Like, quit being don't be nervous about it. You're literally the most experienced guy here, And it was, I think in jobs where the realities are life and death, flying is one of those. That it probably takes a little bit for you to have the confidence to be like, oh, okay, I deserve to be here, especially if you're a little off from the beginning,
I mean, there's nothing wrong with being nervous. And I think one of the things is I realized I didn't have to memorize everything. I just had to know the intent. Like, I mean, I just pulled this out. Ironically, I didn't even put it here, but I have this J-Fire in front of me.
Nice.
That's on my desk. I have a couple cool little things here.
Yeah.
But I look at these things sometimes, and I'm like, man, I haven't called it in an airstrike or fires or any of that for God knows how many years. But I can look at that, and someone could tell me something. I could probably just plain English now, just roll it off because I understand the intent and why. And I could probably go through the schools and get my certifications, but actually get the intent out. And I think that's ultimately what makes people successful and not holds them back is understand, the Marine Corps is really good at this. Understand the commander's intent. And if the commander has trust in their Marines and their troops, they will trust their judgment and ensure that intent is met. And that's all they care about, right? And if you do it in a morally right way, there's nothing that anyone's going to say about that. So have the intent and execute on that intent, and that's really that's what's going to make you successful, not just in the Marine Corps, but in everything you do in life, in your professional career. Understand that. I was just talking about this with a few of my leaders here at Microsoft. Is we have to do better at when someone doesn't understand what we do and they've gone off, maybe we think they've gone off the rails and they're not doing what we think they should be doing. It's not their fault. Did we do a great enough job of portraying and ensuring they understood our intent? And if we didn't, then we were shitty leaders at that point. We're just being managers. We're just expecting things of people from tasks instead of saying, this is why we're doing it. Do you understand why we're doing it? Do you understand why I'm passionate about it? Do you understand where we want to get to? Awesome. Make that happen.
Yeah.
Here's 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 a page of like 9 things that people have done in the past that can make that happen. Right? Now, if you don't use these 9 things, right? Like when you go through, there's 9 lines in a in a in a cast mission, but we can go through all 9 lines, right, Justin? We can say lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or you could say, "Hey, you, this is me, bad guy over there, about 20 feet in front of me, hit bad guy," and probably didn't use any lines, but I got the intent done, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing that makes people successful. And it goes back to, maybe I didn't understand the intent, but I think when I was a student, I probably was more worried about failing than understanding the intent. But I think that's a big thing of being successful nowadays is what's the intent of the leadership? Do I understand it? Are they portraying it properly? And that's a huge thing.
It's definitely more of a. I think we definitely have more of a why kind of generation coming into the military, where I'm not just going to do something blindly. I want to know why we're doing it. Now, there's a time and place for the why. Correct. There's obviously that instant willing obedience to orders and all that stuff. For especially if you're in a job like infantry or something. We'll explain why later. But you have to set the tone that you are going to tell the guys why at some point, either before whatever you're doing or explain afterwards so you have an understanding. That way, when you do that, you want that instant, reaction. You'll probably get it better because the guys know there's a reason behind it. And even if they don't know it right now, it'll get explained to us later on. And people are just, intent is huge. Giving out the intent, making sure people understand. And the other thing too, I think for a lot of junior leaders, like especially, these junior NCOs that are teaching junior Marines, something that I always tried to remind guys is look, man, they don't know what they don't know. If no one's never explained how to, do this, how to whatever, declinate a laser rangefinder or whatever, then why are you expecting them to do it under pressure in a certain amount of time? Someone's got to sit down and teach these guys. It just doesn't come off the back, whatever.
Oh, man. I mean, nail on the head, right? Because when you're flying in the jet and you're sitting there, you get nervous about talking on 4 different radios and touching the throttles and touching the displays and the MDIs and all of that. And you realize, hey, man, we just have to get this plane off the ground. And we have to make it from here to there, right? Stop getting nervous about all of it and just make that happen. When I'm sitting there looking at the lightning pod from the jet instead of, from that side of the house, I'm listening to the guys on the ground. I'm listening to all the crap going on, right? All the bad guys, good guys, fires, artillery. You can hear it all when the radio chimes in, and you can get caught up in that emotion, and you can get caught up in all of that. But you have to keep your eyes focused on, hey, this is what I'm looking at. What's happening, and the intent is to take that thing out. And that's where I've been up in the cockpit, and they've said, hey, your discretion on ordnance, right? And you just simply because they don't know, and you're looking at it and going, hey, that's a building. I think just a standard 500-pound bomb's not going to work. I'm going to need a GBU-12 on this one, right? I'm going to need something to laze it in, and I've got a partner over here that can laser it in, or hey, on the ground, can you laser this thing in for us to exactly where it is? The intent is to take out that guy, not to just stop the bullets coming down range. And I think intent is huge because it really changes the way you look at a scenario and make decisions. And it's not just it's not just a military thing. I think I learned more about all these different tactical and these cool and very unique situations that we've been put into the past. And I learn more about it now than I did when I was there, because I'm able to take some of that and say, man, if you guys want me to go out there and look at why these nation state attacks are happening for all these cyber breaches, do you want me to go mitigate do you want me to go figure out how we're protecting against all these nation state attacks on the cyber side? Or can we go one level back and go, why are they actually attacking us? What are they doing it for? Because it's not just a technology or a data problem. It may be a geopolitical problem. It may be something around our policy. It may be the way we're restricting revenue restricting aid or something like that. So there's always an intent behind why things happen. And I think experiences that you and I have experienced in the past help us get there. And as leaders in the military, and then how you want to grow in the industry, it's a big piece of it, right?
Yeah.
Elevates you.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about when you're flying around as Goose in the back. What is Goose doing in the back seat? What is going on back there? We all know what Tom Cruise and freaking those guys are out flying around. What are you guys doing in the back? Messing with buttons. Are you working the camera most of the time, or what's your role?
Yeah, so I don't like to say I was Goose. Goose dies,
That's
right?
true.
So
yeah, that might not be the best.
So maybe Slider. I think he was one of those guys too, and he was actually good at volleyball as well, from what I remember. So, go with the Slider. But what are you doing back there, man? You're doing a lot. You're talking to 4 different people. You're controlling the weapon systems. You're looking at the collateral damage estimates. I would say you're not really navigating. I mean, the airframe navigates itself. The pilot's navigating for you. We often say like you're dangling the banana in front of their head, so you're just kind of moving the banana around, the stick monkey, right? So it's kind of in the back, you are truly the mission commander. So it's like a project manager. It's someone that's pulling the strings, understands where the gaps are, can stay calm, cool, collected, and able to make the decisions on when to execute, when to drop the munitions, when to and control the battlefield. I think the best scenario to look at it as, especially as a Wizzo in the Hornet community, is I think the number one and most desirable role that all Wizzos want to get to is to become a FAC-A, a forward air control airborne, and get that qualification. There was one point in my career, and it's hard to describe, but there was one point in my career where you're sitting there as the only aircraft in the air. You're managing your fuel, you're managing your ordnance, you're managing your communications with 4 or 5 different assets, and then you've got a stack of about 10 to 12 aircraft in the vicinity, and that's from helicopters to other airplane to jets to tankers to unmanned aerial vehicles. And then that's artillery folks on the ground. That's the troops on the ground. I mean, and everything is there. And sure, you're all there to help those Marines or those NSW folks or the teams guys on the ground. But from the perspective of where you sit, you've got the battlefield in your palm, and you're doing it all I still take notes on papers this big. You're doing it all on like a paper this big on your knee, right? So a lot of the stuff is, and I'm writing things down right here on my palm, right? A lot of the stuff is just in your head, and it's just you're utilizing templates and processes to kind of keep everything in order and timing, and it's all based off of a time on target. So it's like an orchestra. You're a conductor back there. But you're a conductor with millions of dollars of munition, lives at stake, the control to mitigate life and death and risk, and to provide unwavering support and air superiority and firepower superiority to the folks on the ground. So, and the words really well, right? I mean, cleared hot is like one of those words where not only Are you doing it from the ground at the JTAC, but from the air, being able to coordinate fires? And then, and we're not just saying sitting up there and watching this orchestrate and go, right? You're validating, you're making sure that they're pointed in the right direction. I mean, some of the coolest and the scariest moments of controlling the battlefield were controlling other Hornets or Harriers where they're coming into the cone or the attack vectors that they're coming into. So they're heading maybe north, so like 360, or they're heading west. For folks who don't really know how that works, is the nose of the aircraft is pointing 090. So maybe you say, hey, you can attack from, you can go 070 through 090, right? So their nose is pointing that way, and you're actually coming the exact opposite of 070, 090, and you're right outside of their cone. So as they're coming into the target, and look at me talking with my hands, if they're coming in with the target, you're on the other side watching them point at the target while you're here. So you're going nose to nose at these guys, and they're telling you, hey, I'm in 070, I'm in 070, and you're looking, and you're looking down, and you're looking over, and you're looking down, looking over, and I mean, you're closing pretty fast. You're closing at, like 1,000 miles per hour closure, right, between the both of you. And you've got to make split-second decisions and going, yes, you're not pointed at someone good. You're pointed at someone bad. You've said the right things. I'm validating what direction you're heading. Clear it hot. You're pulling off and you're going right to the next person. And it's like orchestration. And then you're timing it and you're doing all of that stuff. So, I mean, I still haven't found a good way to really talk about what I've done and how I've done it and what we do as a community in that, but it's truly an orchestrated effort between both individuals. And there's times where I'm sitting on, autopilot's on or something like that, and I'm changing, the course corrections and doing different things. I mean, we're going back and forth. And it is controlled chaos and controlled 100%. Orchestration. There's times where you don't get along. There's a guy who I flew with. His name's Toto, and we were on our Czech ride to get our qualification. My first one, I did 3 of them. The second one we didn't have time, and I ended up going to 3. Failing 3 times seems like a big problem for me.
3 times the charm.
But the third time we got through it. But the second time wasn't our fault. First time though, we had orchestrated, I think it was like 8 or 9 different aircraft, and there was artillery coming in, and there was guys on the ground. It was just beautiful, right? Justin, I was setting this thing up for like 25 minutes, and all I had to do was just kick it off, and it was just going to ripple like a domino effect. And we went bingo fuel. Went Joker, then we went bingo fuel. So like it was no matter what, you have to cut off and head towards home because you need enough fuel to land at your divert as well. And I said, hey, it is sunny out. There are no clouds out. Field is wide open. There's 2 diverts on the way home. Like, we are about 60 seconds away from kicking this thing off, and we could kick it off, turn over control, and we are good. We've got our qualification. We've dropped, between the 6, every single aircraft has its mission. They'll be dropping bombs. They're coordinating. All of it was like type 2, type 3 at the end. All of it. He's like, no, we're leaving. No, we're leaving. And I was like, screw you, Toto. I took my water bottle and I threw it up in the top cockpit because he started turning around, and we turned control over to some guy on the ground. And I was like, man. And he turned the jet around upside down and like essentially floated the water bottle back and threw it back, and it hit me right back in the face. And I was like, I didn't know you were that coordinated, right, to be able to do that. I was so pissed, and we failed that flight, not because we didn't get the controls, but because we didn't manage our fuel. Yeah. And but that's what it's all about. That's what we did. Like, we argued, we collaborated, we coordinated, but it was all just controlled chaos all the time.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I've actually described it exactly the same way as running an orchestra, as being, as going through, because you have all these little pieces and you're in charge of the timing. You're working with the ground force commander or whoever and establishing like, this is the time that we need to have this happen. here's the effects that we're looking to get. Figure out how to do it, in the most efficient, safest way possible. And man, it was like, it's such a rush when you do have like a big mission going, like when you have like a sweet like fire plan, with multiple assets going to be shooting, and you're literally the dude ready to kick it off. You're like, all right, establish TOT, 1-5 or whatever, and then you just watch it all kind of come together and monitor the situation obviously and give corrections or whatever if necessary.
Still gives you goosebumps when you talk about it.
Dude, I am right now. Seriously, the hair standing up on my arms.
Yeah. Because you're smelling it, you're thinking about it, and you're like, hey, approved to push, and it's just kind of like, oh, here we go, right? Here we go. And it's adrenaline. It's totally crazy.
I could say too that when something fucks up, it is definitely not a good feeling, or when you mess something up, and even if it's like something that's not dangerous or whatever. If you mess something up, it's like a shitty feeling. And I was one of those people where, like, if I got a debrief and it was a bad debrief, then that sat with me for like months. I'd be sitting there doing something else, something random, and it would just randomly pop in my head, be like, "You fucking idiot! I can't believe you said that on the," or like whatever it was.
Yeah, we always said no rank in the cockpit, and we always took our rank off. And when we went into the debriefs and we came out of the debriefs, a lot of us, like including me, it was hard to split off, and close the door, just slam each other, and then open the door back up and say, hey, let's go grab a beer, right? But that was normal in the community. And I still use this like pen all the time, and I joke to my team all the time, like the most used thing on this pen is the red ink, because you just go in there and you just murder board the crap out of everything. But you're right; it does stick with you. But the thing is, you debrief everything. You debrief everything from the way you talk to what you did wrong. There was one time where I dropped ordnance in close proximity of friendlies without a cleared hot.
Oh.
And
that's a big one.
It was a big one, but I was so caught up on the adrenaline, and somebody was expecting it, and the others weren't. And it was pretty close to being danger close, right? It was, arguably probably was.
Is this in country or in training?
This was actually in training. This was in training, which was even worse because everything was friendly at that point. But in country, everything was so restricted, and there was other things we did that we got in a lot of trouble for as well. That were a similar facet. But this was one of those, I think this was one of the first times I'd done it. And I realized that I was so concentrated on lasing, because once they said cleared hot, we dropped it. And then I was just lasing. My eyes were just burning onto the screen, just keeping the crosshairs on where it needed to go. And someone's like, Vishal, you didn't even have approval. You didn't have cleared hot. If you would have just lost sight of that laser, we didn't have a backup laser, we didn't have any of that stuff, like that thing could have slewed. You could have slewed that laser just an inch, and that thing could have hit somebody. Mm-hmm. It was a pretty big deal. So like, you're right. Like when you screw up and you fuck up, right, the consequences are real. They're life and death. But it's easy to see that in those environments when you're playing with things that can take life, right? When you're playing with ordnance and you're playing with bombs and guns and munitions and things that are designed to take life, it's a lot easier to see what life and death are and the consequences of your actions when you're in those types of scenarios. I think when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a little more removed from that, but I have to remind myself that at the end of the day, everything we do, it affects a human in one way, shape, or form.
Yeah, especially... So. Yeah, well, yeah. You're in a corporate job too. That's definitely true. Less so on my case, working from home and kind of doing my own thing. I found myself to be like almost too laid back once I got out because nothing was life and death. You know what I'm saying? Like, this doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Like, this doesn't, who cares? Kind of deal. Because it's like coming from a job and stuff that was so serious to just like a regular life in the real world. It just seems it's just such a weird transition. It's such a weird like dynamic. They're completely different. And And I think what I really liked about the close air support community, the fire support community, being a JTAC was the seriousness of the job, the high stress of the job. You kind of feed off that stress a little bit, but also like you mentioned, like the no rank. Like when we're debriefing, we can all just say like what we want. This isn't because it's such a serious job and because it's life and death. I want to hear your opinion. You know what I'm saying? Like even as an evaluator, if someone messed something up in my eyes, well, explain to me why you did that. Because maybe you're looking at it a different way than I am, and I'm not just understanding your thought process. Help me understand your thought process.
And it's, I think it's an aviation thing as well, right? I mean, we all have call signs, and we actually call ourselves by our call signs more than we do major, lieutenant colonel, private, sergeant Amin. You say, hey, First Lieutenant Amin or Captain Amin. And there's all these formalities behind it. But when there's a flare coming, or let's say you G-lock, right, and you go unconscious, or you do, like, who cares about the rank? Who cares about anything? Like, get their freaking attention and snap them out of it somehow, right? People, VJ, Vajazzle, right, or Vishal, like first name, like it's
Do you want to explain what G-lock is for people that may not know?
Yeah, I mean it's that's at the core of it. When you put the amount G forces on your body, so your body weight x10, x12, depending on how many G's you pull, x8. That's how many G's you're pulling. So when you're in a tight turn, or if you're at the carnival in one of those rides that are circular and you're sitting there and it's pushing you against the wall, or you take you're in your super speed like Mazda Miata or something, and you're taking a turn at like 75 miles per hour and it's pushing you to the side of the door. Those are G forces. So in the aircraft, we pull in the F-18, we pull legally up to 7.5 Gs. We can pull a lot more, and we're in the aircraft. But when you pull Gs, your blood actually moves from your head, out of your neck, elsewhere, and you pass out, right? You go unconscious. So so every jet pilot goes through the centrifuge in this training, where you learn how to breathe, and it's called the hic. If I do it here, I'm just going to sound really weird doing it here. Yeah. But like it's like a hic breathing exercise, and what you do is it helps you retain the oxygen and try to keep as much blood in your head as possible as you're pulling G's, so you don't G-lock. And when you G-lock, you go unconscious and you go unresponsive. So imagine being in the middle of, a dive, or being in an aircraft flying, 400, 500 knots, and you G-lock, right? A split second, you can be in the dirt. You can hit something, like especially if you're in a dive and you pull up out of the dive and you G-lock, and all of a sudden the plane just keeps going down. G-lock's a big deal. So that's what G-locking is, and it's essentially going unconscious because of the force put on you based on the physics of the jet.
When you're flying around, well, for you, what do you think is the most G's you've ever pulled, either in the jet or in a centrifuge?
I've done 9 in the centrifuge, and then in the jet we over G'd it once, and I think we did like 8.1, and the plane had to go through an inspection and all of that because they pulled the limiter on the stick and over G'd it during a BFM, basic fighter maneuvering, dogfighting, or whatever we want to call it, exercise. Or it was an air to ground sortie where actually I think we're pulling up, but it's just so normal. You wearing a G suit accounts for about a half a G or 1 G, 1.5 G maybe, but it's only on your legs, and then the rest is just on your body. And it's just one of those things where you just have to learn and control your breathing. It's super tough. It makes your body. It's like a full body workout for like an hour, and it just it's just part of the job, I guess. And I also like to say, like, you're pulling G's and you're flying fast in the desert, and sun's beating. It's maybe 110 outside or 100 degrees outside, and the sun's beating down on you, and this like through this glass canopy, and like you really do have to be hydrated. And I mean, if you had a few beers the night before, within the legal time frame, I'll say that.
8 hours, right? From drink to stick or something.
12 hours. I don't know what the rule is now. It was like 12 hours bottle to brief when I was doing it. But even if you ate like crap, like fried chicken sandwiches and all this stuff, and you like, the last thing you want to do is wake up feeling like hot garbage, and putting on your flight suit, putting on your G suit, putting on your mission vest, putting on, getting your helmet on, wearing your gloves, like connecting all of the points, and then getting into the jet, and then feeling like hot, like a microwaved bag of garbage, right, in that jet, pulling G's. Like, it's usually not the best day in the cockpit after that.
Pretty miserable.
So yeah, it's pretty miserable. And then you're orchestrating this beautiful symphony. It just doesn't work, So
yeah, too much going on to have any kind of like brain fog or anything like that. Did anyone in your squadron ever have to eject? Did you know anyone that ever ejected?
Yeah, I've known quite a few folks that have ejected, and then I know, like, I mean, there's one of my close friends, died in an F-18 crash in 2015, where he ejected and the jet went into the ground, but he didn't make it out of the ejection. I think he tried to eject right when it hit the ground. So it's a pretty dynamic thing. It's not safe by any means, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like jumping out of a moving car going hundreds of miles per hour. Like the wind, the direction you're driving, like, are you upside down? Are you sideways? But I know a few people that have ejected that have broken every bone in their body. And then I know a good friend of mine, Todd Serene, who passed away in that accident. And then I have friends that didn't even realize they needed to eject, and in a split second, their life was over. So, and unfortunately, there's other causes for why they gave how they gave their lives. But I mean, just amazing human beings. But yeah, ejection it's not a safety net by any means. It's more of a last resort.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it. I just saw the video, I'm sure you saw the other day, of that Michigan Air Show where they had like 2 MiG-21 pilots or something like that. Like,
I haven't seen it yet.
No,
I haven't seen it yet, but now I'll look at it.
Yeah, there's a civilian-owned MiG. They were flying for an air show, and something happened. I'm not sure what happened, but they had to punch out, and the jet landed. They were fine. The 2 pilots landed in a lake, and the jet landed like next to an apartment building or something like that. It's pretty crazy, man. I can't imagine what's going through someone's mind when that's the decision. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm sure.
Yeah, you don't know what's going to happen to a jet, where it's going to go, how it's going to land, right? Like, there was one when I was at the training rag, and one of the guys in our class, he punched out right over University Town Center, UTC La Jolla, and the jet landed in a house, condos, and everyone in that home, died. And the one individual that went grocery shopping that day was the living person, and he had to live with that the rest of his life. And he was just, he was fine, and it's not that he was mentally fine, but like physically, nothing had happened. And so it is something else. And there's so many things you want to do, to mitigate when you do it, how you do it, where you do it. Because it's definitely a last resort, and it's something that you never wish upon anyone. I mean, I got in trouble once for dumping fuel right when I took off from Miramar, because we had a serious engine issues and malfunction of the aircraft and the airframe, and you can't land with we couldn't land with the amount of fuel we had. We were so heavy we knew it was going to happen right away. So as soon as we took off, it happened. The issues happened on rotation. So as soon as we were able to get airborne, we immediately put the dumps on. And if anyone listening knows where Miramar is in proximity to the PGA La Jolla golf course, right? Just fly. We had to get over all the residential. We were trying to get over the water, and the dumps were on the whole time. And I mean, it's funny the amount of complaints we got because of all the fuel that we were dumping over, Torrey Pines.
Yeah.
And that area, to just try to dump enough and then figure things out while we were over the water so that we can come back and just land that same direction back. But it's almost like we just didn't care, right? And we came back, and I think everyone understood after a little bit, where the civilian population understood. Well, they probably didn't really understand ever, but some of them that I feel figured out why we did it, and they just said, "Hey, it was an emergency. It was legal for them to do it because of that." They don't realize that you're doing everything you can so that you don't have to punch out, and that you don't park the jet somewhere, right? Like dumping JP8 all over La Jolla and Torrey Pines, probably not what anyone wants. Is it a lot better than parking a jet in the dirt or in a house or somewhere? Yeah, 100%, right? Any day of the week. So yeah, that you're absolutely right. Like there's so many things you do before something like that happens.
Yeah, so let's jump forward a little bit because I don't want to run out of time, but you and I deployed together. We were on the 11th MEU together, did a deployment. Luckily, I'm pretty sure you were off the ship, right? When the ship got tasked to go do something for a few months. You were in Kuwait with us the entire time, weren't you? Or floating around?
I was doing a couple things in different places.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a couple, I thought I was special with some of the team's guys and doing other things. And so as you guys got tasked around, I was on the other side of the tasking, receiving certain people and moving people, and then in other countries as well. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting deployment when we went out.
Well, it wasn't me. Luckily, I got off the ship. Me and some of my team got off to work with the Royal Marines in Kuwait for one of the exercises. Yeah. And while we were in the middle of that, the ship got pulled. So we ended up being in Kuwait for like 3 months or something, like going from Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was with you for most of that.
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
So, yeah. I was the So we're setting up air and operations and supporting folks going up north from Kuwait, and then in Saudi Arabia, and then going, doing a couple other things as well, obviously, and then coming back. But yeah, that was a very interesting deployment.
Yeah, it was a good time. I mean, it wasn't. Well, I won't say it was an okay time. It was still the MEU.
Yeah.
The MEU was miserable. But we did get to do some cool stuff and had some really cool opportunities. I mean, we were doing CAS. I know my team was doing CAS like 2 to 3 times a week. We had nothing else to do, and there was patchies there and everything else. Like, let's go work these guys. But what I would talk about on our way back, after we got back from deployment, an ISIS kill list came out. And your name appeared on it, which is pretty fucked up.
Yeah, so it was March 21st of 2015. So we'd been back for a couple months, but there was a couple incidents that happened on that deployment. There was a couple task forces that were being run. So we were doing a lot of work in Hinjar, in that province. We're doing some work. We're supporting that mission down in Yemen when we pulled the hostages out of the embassy and brought them back to the Macon, and neither of them made it. And you and parts of your team, and then a couple other folks, my team and all of us, we're all supporting all these different operations. Needless to say, a couple of the things that we were supporting were pretty high visibility. Even though we were on this MEU, there's pockets of just mission associated with this MEU. So what ended up happening was there was a couple points where, you were with me in a couple of them, where we were on the ground looking at aircraft coming back from up north down south, and we were kind of moving them along, or we were we were supporting traps, right? Recovery of aircraft and personnel, and things of that nature. So our names were all on some of these things. And we finished deployment. When I went over to the Philippines to do some other work out there on the way back, while everyone else took the ship back, right? I ended up flying home with a few of our friends from the Philippines after doing some work with like joint munitions and some education for the Philippines government out there. And I came home and my son was, I just met my son. He was born, I don't know if you remember, he
Yeah.
was born while we were on the Indian Ocean. So my wife sent me a picture, and that's how I saw him a video for the first time. And, I was talked to her on the sat phone after he was born. So, like, we were out there, and I just come home from that deployment. She had this like sign that said, "Hey, waited my whole life to meet you," and all of this stuff, right? And he was there, so it was like one of the best days, and most like sad and difficult days that I've ever had, just because you just realized you missed the birth of your kid, and he's been around for 8 months or whatever it was when you first met him, and then, so we lived in this house down here in SoCal, and going back and going to Mag 11 to be an instructor and go work as one of the opsos at the Mag at the Marine Air Group down at Miramar. And I was driving down the freeway one day in LA, and my grandfather had passed away that day, so we were just there, and we had a birthday for one of our kids the next day. And next thing you know, I got a call from Asphalt. I think it was Asphalt. Pretty sure it was him, but he called me. He said, "Hey, are you okay?" And I said, "Nah, I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't talked to you in like 8 years since the RAG or whatever it was." And next thing you know, like my wife's looking at her phone, and like she doesn't look so well. And I'm like, "What's going on?" And I look over, and it was like an ISIS flag, and it was like the top 100 people. It said, "Hey, these are the top 100 people that were involved in operations against ISIS in the last year. Here's their home address. Here's their pictures, their names, their profiles, their home address, their phone number, all of that. Go to their homes and behead them and their family." Right? And I think for most Marines at that moment, like you're just kind of like, yeah, bring it, right? Like I've got an arsenal of like weapons and a cache in my house, and like I will kill anyone that comes over here. And I was a high tight, enlisted gung ho Marine. I was like, you just bring the fire, right? But at that point in my career, like it was like the 18-year mark. It was life's a lot different, and if it was just me staying at the house with all my friends, yeah, absolutely. Like I'm not worried about it. Like it's a lone wolf kind of call out. Like we haven't seen anything like this in the States, but it wasn't. I had a newborn at home that I'd never met. My wife didn't know anything that I was really doing over the last year. Like it's not like her and I just talk every day about jobs and work and things like that. And the next thing you know, like your picture is all over CNN. You got news crews at your home, like in your windows, trying to look in, trying to, you have people driving by all the time, and then you get a call from the Joint Terrorism Task Force and the Bureau saying, "Hey, they caught an ISIS sympathizer here, and then they caught another one here. Both of them had your address and your kill list to come kill you, and then this happens, and this happens," and you're like, "Holy shit! Like, what just happened to my life?" Right? And it was one of the scariest moments of our lives, and there's a lot of worse things that could have happened. Right?
Sure.
We lost a couple friends those couple years and other things, but and every state had different privacy laws and data laws. So like you can scrub some of this information in one state, but you couldn't scrub it in another, right? And the media could contact you in one state, but they couldn't contact you in another. In California, you had to disclose everything, and people knew everything, which was just really bad, and the worst part about it was the first public outing of a lot of operators and and individuals that supported missions that was that tactically that forward, right? And set at that like granular level, like here's exactly where they live, and listen, we're over here, but all you ISIS sympathizers, go, Like if you can't afford to come out here, like you have people there, and here's the blueprint. And that's scary, because once that data is out there, it's out there. And I didn't know anything about technology at the time. And after that, I got out at 19 years and working with some amazing congressmen and senators. Like they helped me stay in for 21 years and be in the private sector at the same time. So I got to finish at 21 years. But dude, I was an enlisted Marine in the Hornet community. Went back on the ground side, got to do stuff with all the special people, um, and then try to get back into the aviation community, and then went to be an instructor, and then go back the leadership route, and all of that ended for me, because of this. Right, I had to make a decision. They said, well, and the worst part is the Marine Corps didn't know what to do. The DoD didn't know what to do with any of this, and I said, listen, I can't live in this house anymore. Right, I mean, I've got people showing up. I've got credible threats that have shown up now. And the worst thing that happened to me was when the Marine Corps said, it's not not our problem. That's your house. And I said, I'm in for 19 years. Like, I can't live here. I'm paying a mortgage here. My family can't safely be here. Like, I'm working with the Bureau and the Joint Terrorism Task Force and escalated law enforcement. And you're telling me as the DoD, you can't do anything? And they said, we can't. It's out of our jurisdiction. So I had to make a decision to get out at that time instead of take their offer to go do, staff school again, or like over in Kansas. And I said, my wife has to actually work to pay our bills right now because I can't afford to pay a mortgage here and then move on base and lose BAH. Like it's not that I live this glamorous lifestyle, but I do have a home and I do have a family, and my wife does work and we live here.
And
so
it's got to be difficult to sell the house if you even wanted to, right? Because that's all
dude,
has to be disclosed.
The other thing. That's the other thing, Justin. Right? Everyone, the house was in a great location. It's not like it was a house, like a big house, but it's a great location in SoCal. The market was great. The market had raised, right? So like the valuation was good, but the difference, everyone's like, oh yeah, we'll totally buy the house. No one's selling here. And then once you get to escrow and you put the disclosures out, everyone's like, well, I'm not paying full price for that.
Like, oh, it's on an ISIS kill list.
It's on an active kill list where we have to sign off that there could be an ISIS sympathizer that comes here to try to kill us because they want to kill whoever lives in this house. Yeah, I'll sign that, but I'll take this house for what you bought it 4 years ago. And we're like, you got to be kidding me! Like that's our life savings, that's our fortune. Like we ended up actually having to find this amazing realtor. I won't plug them, but this amazing realtor in their company, and they had to go find a special buyer with a certain like social demographic that essentially didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right. But they gave a shit enough to say, we're not paying you more than this. And at that point, we couldn't afford to not do it. So we actually sold the house and had to rebuild our entire lives after liquidating all of our financial future freedoms to go do that, and moved around 4 or 5 times, lived with our parents, lived with like friends, family, like lived apart, like lived together. Like, and it's not just the logistics crap, but like it causes like, I mean, to rebuild the trust within a marriage and a family, and like shielding your kids from what they don't even know, and like and living with the black car outside of your house, and being scared to turn on your car in the morning before you put your kids in it. Like I say that line all the time to folks, but it's true. Like it never gets old. I was like, remote start. But I was like, listen, I was in the Marine Corps. I didn't have money to do like buy a new car, do any of these things. I had to go get escalated law enforcement and do all these other things, and nobody was paying for anything. And I was already shelling another 15 grand for all the moving expenses within 3 months. And this is money I didn't have.
Yeah.
So it was just a very tough time. And at that point, I decided I want to get into tech, and I was like, I'm gonna get into tech. I see something there. And I learned a lot about cybersecurity and data. And I taught myself how to code. I taught myself all these things, and ended up taking a low-paying job at a big tech firm, and applying for jobs at Starbucks at the same time, and all of that, just to kind of
That's
get
crazy.
through get through it. And you and I know each other from when I was in the service, right? Like you would like even me and my peers are still in, right? They're on top of huge commands now, and they're COs, and their next step is to pick up their star and all of this stuff. And I'm sitting here going, man, I'm applying for jobs at Starbucks and taking a nothing job, and I can't afford to go back to school because I have two kids at the time, right? And my wife still works, and I mean, it's like navigating through that, and it took us years, and it's still like we just wanted to go whole again, and eventually I went public with that story and was able to tell it, um, and I've kind of dedicated my life to focusing on data and cybersecurity, and I have the blessings to do it at one of the largest technology companies in the world now. So, and I have brilliant people that work around me and work with me, and I don't want to say work for me, but leaders that I was able to bring on that are just brilliant at all levels. You know.
It probably gives you an interesting perspective in the cybersecurity community, right? Because you've actually, seen what could happen with with a data leak or something like that.
Yeah, I think for me, I like to believe that the biggest issue I see in our community is we're all trying to we're all trying to every company's trying to make money. They live off of profit. They're for-profit organizations, and we lose sight of mission.
Mm-hmm.
And they say we know mission, we love mission, we're going to try to build with mission, but it's not mission only that we lose sight of. We lose sight of the human, and that is the perspective I like to think I want to bring, and what I want to do, and how I'm looking to change how we look at cyber and cybersecurity in general. And there's a few folks within organizations like where I am that believe me and believe in that and are going to take risks in that. And that's the biggest challenge now, is to remind, like, people will dismiss the actions that happened to me and say, yeah, that really sucks, Vishal. I'm sorry that happened. But I don't think anyone really, not many people can actually feel what the story that I'm giving you and that I'm sharing is like. Imagine opening up your door and seeing a threat right in front of you, and your kids playing Legos right behind you, and you are naked of anything to help you protect anyone behind you. I'm no longer in Justin. We're no longer in theater with a 45 or a 9 mil, right, and an M16 and a radio and gear, right? I'm there with a t-shirt and shorts on with kids behind me, right? It's a different type of fear. And what people don't understand in this industry is that happened to me, but no one is immune to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? No one, right? You have employees that may not like you. You have organizations that are doing work internationally. You have country, nation state actors for like Russian, Chinese, Iran, nation state actors that aren't just trying to hack your email for money. They're trying to hack the waterways into the states of California and Nevada and change the sensors to do bad things, to poison people, to kill people, to do disruption to the economy, to turn off the grid. I mean, imagine what happens if a hacker turns off the grid. You're not just going to lose electricity, but imagine what the physical consequences are if there's no power to places,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, imagine the riots, the looting, the killings, it's lawlessness. And until we realize that data and that type of personal data, and what people are doing affects more than revenue, and affects how we need to protect our businesses and how we need to protect our checkbooks, and we realize that it affects the way you actually live your life. We're not thinking about it the right way. So that's kind of where that story went and where I'm at today. Now, um, it's it's I don't say it's a blessing, but I mean, if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now, and I'm really passionate about it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I know what you're saying. I mean, I'm on as a digital marketing guy. I mess with data a lot, on the consumer side of it, obviously, I always get for people that don't really understand how data is being used, they automatically assume everybody's using it nefariously. You know what I'm saying? Where a lot of times it's just me, a guy like me, helping someone get better ads on Google Ads, get better, you're targeting a certain audience, because as a business, you only want people that will possibly want your product to see the ad. As a consumer, I don't want to see ads for stuff that I don't want to, that I have no interest in. And that's kind of where that is. But then obviously there's those like dark sides of it where
malicious.
The malicious actors, again, the nefariousness of it, the black hat kind of hackers and stuff that will exploit the data and stuff. Do you see, I don't see data collection slowing down. I mean, it's
only increasing. I think we talk about cyber threats and we talk about ransomware and we talk about breaches, but what we don't talk about is what they have access to, right? It's not just being breached and going through a ransomware attack, but it's the amount of data that folks have access to. And it's just getting bigger, and those data sets are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. There's two sides of this coin, though, man. Is number one, like, I feel that, there's these whole principles that we use in the data community and in the security community, like zero trust. You might have heard that in the past. And one of the core pillars of zero trust is, assume breach or assume compromise. And when I look at data, when you talk about data, like the data that you're looking at, a lot of people should say, assume that it's compromised, assume that someone else has it. And I agree with that. I also believe that when you are working with someone and you physically are saying, hey, can you do this XYZ with my data? Can you help me build a marketing campaign? Can you help me utilize this data to reach a greater subset of people to evangelize maybe all this good work I'm doing? Also assume good, right? With how people are utilizing data, why they're utilizing their data. And security should be looked at from the onset, not from the latter part, right? Don't look at it as like, man, this person has data, what are they going to do with it? It should almost be looked at as, well, shoot, where did I derive this data from? How did it derive it? Is it coming from somewhere? So if something was bad to happen, can I track it back here? Am I able to investigate? Is someone able to investigate on it? Is there a paper trail that I could clip it back to? And if there is, like, I'm going to intend. I can't think of the word now, but I'm going to assume that Justin's going to be using all of this data for good rather than for bad. So that's what people should feel like by assume breach or assume compromise is, hey, I'm assuming that this can be used for bad, but I'm also assuming that what he's doing is good, and I think that's where we have to come to in a place where everything we do and the people we interact with, people are really trying to do more good rather than more bad. And in the cybersecurity community in the world that I work in, it's the opposite. Everyone is bad, and you have to make sure that your data is protected. And we have to change that narrative, right? Like, data should be used for good, because every company in the world now, everything that you do is data driven, right? So why close it all off, right? More data can give us more signals, can give us more insight, that can give us more visibility. It's also going to increase the attack surface, but we have to just understand that, right? You almost have to be accepting of it. Like, from what happened to me in 2015 to where we are now, we're almost 10 years away from that moment, right? When my data was compromised, there was physical data, and that's the other thing, right? What are we using the data for? Where is it coming from? Like, the data that was compromised for me was not coming from. There was a lot of open source data that you can find off of anyone, if they have a mortgage, if they have a car payment, if they have it, you can find it, like the yellow pages and the white pages. You could find it.
Yeah.
But it's when you associate that data with who they are and what they did, that's when it becomes dangerous, right? So you have to just be mindful of that as well. Because I still, now I've been more comfortable to give my data and my information back out. I'm talking to you about this right now, But I'm talking to you about it so that we can really influence and shape the way people look at this to do more good rather than to do more bad. You
Yeah,
know?
for sure. Where do you see cybersecurity going in the future with the increase in AI capabilities and
Yeah.
breakthroughs that are happening in like quantum computing?
I think cybersecurity is going to be one of those pillars that will always be there because there will always be bad actors. There will always be malicious intent by at least one person, and it only takes one person. With AI and machine learning, things like fusion that we heavily base some of our products on. I think that's what that really is going to do is help us do a couple things. Number one, it's going to help us manage. It's going to help us drive cybersecurity importance and the ability to drive awareness for cybersecurity within all sectors, um, not just in the federal government, but in the private industry. It's going to make things not as complicated.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to make things more user friendly. What I mean by that is when you look at 65 trillion signals a day that run through a platform, and you want to go investigate all these signals and you want to go investigate all these anomalies, you have to be a cyber person to go do that, right? But what if you can utilize AI, which you can do now, and automate all those signals and utilize all these machine learning algorithms to give you the anomalies so that that one person can look at what all that machine learning and all that AI has given you to say, maybe just look at this, this, and this, right? So it takes out the middleman, essentially. It makes things faster. And then what if you can utilize that AI into a common language model where instead of giving it to you in, some language that you don't understand, KQL or whatever, that it can translate that into real speak. So now you've done a couple things. You've taken this skills gap of cybersecurity and you've decreased it immensely utilizing AI and machine learning. And you're utilizing computers and quantum to do the job of many. But you still need a human on top of that. So you can skill people at a higher level. You can pay them more. You can open up more roles to do those types of things. And then the other thing is you've opened up a whole sector of jobs, of enablement to a whole demographic of folks that maybe didn't have the ability to go learn these languages, to go learn cybersecurity, to go learn some of these things, but they can understand the concepts. And now you can teach them real time how to look at this data. So I think AI, machine learning, quantum absolutely is going to speed things up, and it speeds things up. I mean, quantum obviously is going to change the way we do anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
From authentication to, and we're already seeing it, but we have to look at the other side of the house: is how is it going to enable people to and give them more opportunities? And I think that's what it's going to do. It's going to give us more opportunities and the communities more opportunities to get more jobs, to skill faster, to protect more people, to protect more devices, and not get caught in the minutia. And that's the future of where cybersecurity meets AI. Some early use cases are you have security operations centers where people are sitting there at desks in front of screens and they're sorting through alerts and nation state attacks and they're investigating these things. What if you can use a machine to do that? And instead of looking at one every like 15, 20 days, like you're looking at one every couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that's how we're utilizing it right now is to optimize things. But we're gonna go past the optimization at some point. It's gonna be normal. And I think learning these algorithms, learning how to validate some of these things and taking data at scale and then putting a diverse mind on it, someone that's maybe not a cyber person, maybe someone that's like a Marine or someone that's a marketing person and saying, hey, look at these models, what do you see? Right? I think that's AI and cybersecurity and machine learning combined. I mean, it's just going to change the way people think about things and it's going to
Yeah.
make things a lot more efficient, but it's going to drive us to do a lot more as well.
Yeah, I really believe that everybody and every industry needs to look at AI and how it could be implemented in their own. I use it to update code. I'm not a coder. I don't know, but I've used it multiple times to be like, hey, is this efficient code? No. Okay. What changes? And then go through and I think with something like Chat GPT, what a lot of people don't necessarily understand is that it's going to do whatever you tell it to do, but the more specific you are, the better. The more inputs that you give it. Here's some parameters I want you to work around and stuff like that. I was telling a guy the other day, I go, using Chat GPT, I always think of it as a mindset as I'm talking to like a PSC. Like if I don't tell him specifically step by step of what he's got to do, then it's going to get fucked up. So it enables me because it lets me do stuff that I may not have the capability to do, but I know how to explain my outcome, that end state that like we talked about before. I know how to like break that down to the system so I can get the results that I'm looking for. It's I don't know, it's going to be a weird world, man. I know
there's people already doing it. Yeah, I heard I tried this after I heard it and it worked. And the first time I heard it was from a gentleman, brilliant guy from RSA, and he had a daughter and she needed to take a test, right? And she missed a test at school, and they usually offer the retakes, and it's like standard, like you are afforded a retake if you miss the test for XYZ reasons. But the test she missed was at the end of like a spring break or something like that, so there was no time to do the retake. So she had to settle for the test score instead of going and being able to take the retake like she was supposed to be able to. And it was essentially brought down her GPA or something. And she was really upset about it because she was in the running for, I think, valedictorian or something like that. And it's like, this wasn't fair. People got to retake it here. I've never done it. I wanted to retake it here. And, so the teacher wrote back and said, hey, I'm sorry. This is what happened. And the parents actually took the teacher's note and put it in ChatGPT and said, I really just don't agree with this. And ChatGPT just spit out a response email to the teacher.
That's funny.
And then, but that's not where it ended, right? It was like, oh, that's a pretty good response. But I really want to point out that she should be able to take this test again. So that's what he wrote in, and it amended the email. And then he read the email and said, I think it'd be really great if she had the option to take the test again. He said, no, but I want to make it, I don't want there to be an option. She rates to take this test again. And it spit out a very specific email with references, with, policy, like all these data, and said, I expect that she will be able to take the test again in the next upcoming days, per the guidance here. He's like, and he sent it, and he's like, and he said, the crazy thing about this is I'm a professor at a university, and this is just as good as, if not better than what I would have been able to do in a few minutes.
Yeah, it's so fast.
And he's just having a conversation. It wasn't a search function. It was literally just like talking to a PFC.
Yeah, exactly. I know the first time I was doing code with it, it gave me like a truncated piece of the code because it has a character limit. And I was like, what? And I didn't know that, like, to use that word, truncated. I was like, oh, hey, keep going with the code from where you cut it off. And it goes, we'll keep going from the truncated portion. And I was like, in my own mind, I was like, oh, it understands that as truncated, so I'll use that. So it's almost like teaching me also, like if you pay attention to it, it teaches you what to say back to it. It gives you some feedback too, like, how it words something. I like pay attention to how it words it, and I use that. You know what I'm saying? It's like
dude, you're 100% right, because I hear a lot of people saying I'm banning it. We're not letting people use it. We're not letting people do things, and I equate that to us when we were growing up. I equate that to my kids now, right? Like I could say you're not allowed to use, all the video games, and you're not allowed to use the devices, but I wasn't able to do things like they can at their age until I was probably my 20s, right? Like go through the settings, make adjustments, like do all these things. And I think it's just making them smarter. It's making them more. I mean,
For
there's
sure.
pros and cons to
Yeah.
everything, right? But what I'm saying here is we're finding different ways that people are absorbing information, and we're just gonna have to keep upping our game, right? It's not like I'm trying to create someone that understands everything. Like I still have to like implement. Hey, you're playing this game. Do you know how it's written? Do you know where it comes from? Do you know like? And people say, well, how do I use ChatGPT? And how do you invest in ChatGPT in the future? I said, if you really want to learn about ChatGPT, don't just use it as a search function, and don't just use it to write essays and all these other things.
Yeah.
Go learn how the algorithms are are laid out within ChatGPT. How is it doing what it's doing?
Hmm.
I think that's the next thing. If you can understand how it's doing what it's doing, so you can validate it faster in the future, you're mitigating any of that like risk, or you're mitigating all of the errors and all those things as well. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think definitely. So my son's in high school, and I'm like, hey, man, this. I was showing it to him. I'm like, don't be using this on papers and stuff. But there's nothing wrong with using it to maybe get ideas. Like, hey, list me 10 ideas for this type of paper or something like that. Use it as a tool. And I think schools are starting to realize that too. I saw a video on Instagram where a professor was like, hey, like 80% of you guys use Chat GPT to take your test. By the way, I'm using Chat GPT to grade it, kind of deal. And it was like, hey, I'm using it too, kind of deal. We can't not
Yeah.
we can't reject the technology because it's not you're basically pulling the head or the covers over your head while the rest of the world continues on, because it's not going
Yeah.
away. So you might as well embrace it and kind of figure out how you can use it. And now there are schools that are offering classes like what do they call it, prompt engineering. I think there's job positions out there that are being created like prompt engineer and stuff like that, which gets some ridicule from some people in tech. And but I see why, like using Chat GPT, using any kind of tech, when you're in it, it seems like, oh, it's like everybody should know this. This is pretty straightforward stuff. But then when you talk to someone that doesn't really mess with it at all, they have zero idea how to create prompts and stuff. And you're like, oh, I guess there is like a need. This business owner doesn't have time to learn prompts or learn how to utilize ChatGPT. That's why they're going to bring in a professional that can just bring that asset to them and meet his
I mean,
intent.
it's what we talked about earlier, right? Like people, it's going to open up opportunities for people who've never been in those spaces before, and people are going to get people aren't going to like it, right?
Yeah, I'm doing
So
website development, and I'm not like I said, I'm not a coder, but I know what I can do to improve websites. I know. I'm not a full, obviously, I would never call myself a website developer, but I'm learning some of the ways that I can use AI to complete tasks like a developer would. You know what I'm saying? So, and things that I never would have been able to do before. So it's really
yeah,
good stuff, man. Technology is going to keep pushing. If people are really interested in the cyber stuff, I also recommend go back and listen to a couple episodes ago. Brian Russell, who was my old CO at First Anglico, after he left there, he went to Cyber Command. So he talks about his time there and working against ISIS and stuff in Cyber Command. So it's a really interesting conversation. VJ, it's been a great convo, man. Do you have any organizations or anything you want to promote?
yeah, for sure, man. There's a couple. Number one, you know, I do a lot of work with the Travis Manion Foundation. I volunteer with them, and I love their mission. They anchor their mission on the legacy of First Lieutenant Travis Manion, who gave his life on his second deployment to Iraq. And before he left, he told his brother-in-law, if I don't go, someone less willing, less able will have to. And I use those 5 words: if not me, then who? And how I try to lead and try to influence change and more good around our community. And I challenge everyone here to kind of take those 5 words to heart: if not me, then who? In everything you do. It doesn't have to be life changing, but those 5 words can really help you and help people around you define what selflessness and service is. So that organization does so much work, and if you volunteer with them, always tell them I said hello and I sent you. But the big thing is their mission is just great. And if you don't volunteer with them, right, there's so many other organizations that you can give to, but at the end of the day, always feel free to connect with me as well. I'm on LinkedIn and all of that other stuff. So it's just a really pleasure being on with you and seeing it, Justin. It's really awesome.
Yeah,
So
it's been a while, man.
thanks for this, man.
Yeah. It's been a while. It's been a really, like I said, it's been a really good conversation, catching up and then hearing a little bit more kind of detail about your career and stuff. Like I said, I didn't even know before this that you were prior enlisted. So that was cool to hear. Everybody check out his stuff. I'll throw the link for that in the description so people could check that out. Check out my website, jkramergraphics.com. If you're looking for bulk orders for your unit, t-shirts, stuff like that. Or if you need digital marketing, reach out, hit me up. I can help you with SEO, Google rankings, and all that stuff. Good stuff. All right, man.
It's awesome, man.